Geek. Talking baseball every week. Cause they're Gleeman and the Geek.
And welcome to Gleeman and the Geek, first Snowfall edition. I am John Bundles of Twins Daily. With me, somewhat rattled, Aaron Gleeman of TheAthletic.com.
It took me about 9 minutes to almost get into an accident. Day one of snowfall. I've only been living in Minnesota for 30
If you saw a Honda Fit in an intersection at 6, run up against close to a light pole.
Yeah, there were a lot of people watching. It's just, I joke about this on PA show a lot, my Honda Fit, because I hate it. I guess on this show too, we've joked about it. I really hate it. I've grown to hate it as a car. It's a perfectly mediocre car,
right?
Which
is all you're looking for, truth be told.
Yeah, I mean, it wasn't.
Right.
I didn't buy a luxury vehicle here. It's a perfectly mediocre car for like 7 months of the year, and then it's completely useless for the other 5 months. And the thing, which we happen to live in Minnesota, which I didn't pick a great car for that. But it's like, yeah, first snowfall, it's like, all right, it's coming down pretty good, but it's not like there's big ice chunks built up yet or all this stuff. And I'm just like, first stoplight coming over here. I pull out of my garage, get onto the street. Okay, red light. I'm like, uh-oh, here we go. You know you have a bad car when you get nervous from red lights.
Right.
Because I'm like, this is going to have to start up again. Yep. And then I was making a left turn, come over here downtown, and it just locks up completely. And I'm like, all right, this is happening, I guess. And I very luckily maneuvered it so that it made only slight contact with a stoplight instead of just bowling over it. Well, probably not bowling it over, but probably just killing me. So I'm alive.
Here's the dad wisdom I will share with everybody because it took me 45 years to discover this. It wasn't until we had a Scion where I was like, why does this thing slide around so much?
Yeah.
There are 3 kinds of tires. There are all-weather tires, and now those you can just wear all season, right? Then there's performance tires. You only want those in the summer. And then there's snow tires in the winter.
Right.
So if you don't have all-weather tires, you need to swap out the snow tires and the other tires twice a year. And if you do have snow tires, if you have a car that, for whatever reason, has problems, if you get yourself snow tires, it's almost like getting four-wheel drive. They are very good.
Here's how.
Now, that said, I don't know what kind of tires you've got.
Neither do I.
Just so we're clear, I was, 45 years old, driving around on a Scion with performance tires in the winter, and I was exactly the same use. Like, God forbid, and it's a stick shift too, on top of it, right? God forbid I am on a snowy road, stopped at a red light, uphill.
Yeah, it's over. You might as well get out and push it.
Right.
Like the Flintstones.
With those tires, it did not matter, right?
Yeah.
Because I had performance tires in the winter. You can't have...
I know nothing about cars, obvious, if you didn't figure that out from the last 3 minutes. And I got new tires, I had a puncture in one of my tires 2 years ago, driving on University. It's a terrible road.
Yes, that is a terrible. That was a terrible road.
You'd think it wouldn't be because the mayor of the city lives on that road, essentially.
They have fixed that up, though, right?
It's a little better, but it's still.
Oh God, that in the spring, that place is that road is just a disaster. University between 30, just west of 35W along University. Oh my God.
So I got new tires, and I just think I told them, "Can you put new tires on?" And they went, "Yeah." And I'm sure I didn't look at them or anything. And
it was August when you did it.
It was August when I did it.
So they might have given you those summer tires. Those
if they put performance tires, if they had an interaction with me in August with my rusted out Honda Fit and they put performance tires on there, I should be able to sue them for $1 billion. So we'll see.
Honda Fit.
Yeah. Anyway. Hi, everybody. I made it. Now, I'm kind of wanting to do like a 3-hour show just because I don't want to go back in my car and drive home.
Yeah.
I've already now scared myself 40 years into living in Minnesota.
Snow's not going to get better in the next 3 hours.
Well, no, but I can maybe I'll just Uber home, leave the car here. The kind of Honda Fit just leaves at your building.
That's right. It's just there now.
Okay.
Till spring.
We actually have a lot to talk about other than my complete inability to be an adult human living in Minnesota, which is a constant topic.
We've got a lot to talk about.
Yeah, this is
so much so I don't know that we're going to get to all the topics we prepared.
Well,
but
not
we'll
if we
see.
keep talking about performance
guess
tires
not.
for
Correct.
30 minutes. This was all just an ad placement for. Well, we didn't even name it. I don't know what it could be for Honda Fit.
Right.
It definitely is not an ad for a Honda Fit. If you were thinking about advertising Honda Fit on this show, don't, because I refuse to talk nicely about it. Terrible car.
It's got to be some for snow tires. So it has to be. It has to be a snow tire brand.
Just you know how like they'll say like you'll see an advertisement for like avocados,
Yeah.
and you're like not even a specific place selling out, just the notion of avocados.
Right, yeah, it's just
the notion
the
of
snow tire industry is backing this thing.
Yeah,
Up. Yeah.
that's great. Yeah, okay, that'll work. Just get snow tires. Anyway, this week there's a couple deadlines. Well, first of all, the offseason is fully underway. There's been some trades. There's been a few signings, which we'll talk about, including one, an expected one, Clayton Kershaw re-signing with the Dodgers, but that crosses a name off the starting pitching list, which we're going to talk a lot about today.
Wayne, right? I guess that happened a couple weeks ago, but
he never even got to free agency.
Yeah, right.
But the first deadline, so the offseason is fully underway, and then the two deadlines this week will sort of spur action a little bit. Just, deadlines create action. The first one is Tuesday, I think, afternoon, early evening. I'm not even sure. 5 o'clock, I want to say. The players to protect players from the Rule 5 draft. Tuesday is the deadline to add them to the 40-man roster. And the Rule 5 draft is the first week of December. It's the Thursday of the winter meeting, so that's like the 9th or the 10th or something like that. I don't know. I'll be there. It's in San Diego. The reason they have the deadline 3 weeks out is so that teams can prepare their lists.
Right.
And so tomorrow, which is Tuesday, we're recording this Monday morning, you have to add all the players you want to protect, make not eligible for selection in the Rule 5 draft. You add them to the 40-man roster, and then teams can spend the next 3 weeks going over their scouting reports, looking at video, talking about them, and making rankings and all that stuff. So that has caused the Twins, which we've talked about the last couple weeks, to drop a bunch of guys from the 40-man roster. Cody Stashak, they just dropped yesterday. So they're at 36 now, I think, on the 40-man roster.
Okay.
Which, we'll talk more about this, but that should be enough because typically we've had a segment on these shows around this time every year where I kind of go over, here are the 7 guys they probably want to add to the 40-man roster to protect them from the Rule 5 draft, or here are the dozen guys who are in competition for those spots, and you need a lot of spots. But the funny thing that happened, by virtue of being the most injured team in the history of the world, is that a lot of those guys, Matt Wallner, Louis Varland, Simeon Woods Richardson, and there were a couple other ones, guys who normally would have been the ones we were saying, they have to add them to the 40-man roster.
They've got a clear space to add these guys.
They were called up in August or September.
Right. That's right.
And so you go, well, okay, that was 3 more guys. There was one other that I'm forgetting. So 4 guys. There's a couple like Edward Julian, who's kind of a no-brainer to add to the 40-man roster. And there's always going to be a handful of sort of coin flip guys that it just depends. Do they like this guy and or do they think this player type might actually get selected in the Rule 5 draft? Because if you're a high A corner outfielder, you're just not going to get picked in the Rule 5 draft because Major League teams have to stash you on the Major League roster all season. But if you're a catcher or a reliever or a utility infielder, sometimes those guys get picked from the low minors. But the Twins are in, I don't want to say not good shape, but just there's not a whole lot that they need to do because a lot of those guys have already been added. Right. So I would guess maybe 2 or 3 more guys will get added. Julian being one of them. Matt Cantorino is probably a second one, even though he's injured.
So. Yeah.
And then maybe one or 2.
He's not undergoing Tommy John though, is he?
Yes, he already
for
did.
the whole year.
Yeah.
Okay. Well.
Which the funny thing with that is, he has to go on the 40-man roster to protect him from the Rule 5 draft, even though he's missed the majority of this past season and is going to probably miss the whole 2023. Once the season begins,
you can just put him on the 60.
You can transfer him to the 15-day IL or the 10-day IL to the 60-day IL, which then sort of effectively makes him invisible on the 40-man roster. and then you can fill that spot because players on the 60-day IL don't count, which is how the Twins ended up with 52 guys on the 40-man roster at the end of the season. However, in this sort of off-season zone, there is no 60-day IL, and so you can only have a maximum of 40 players. So you kind of have to stash these guys, or you kind of have to make room for these guys until you get to the point where you can move them to the 60-day IL.
Right. You can never have more than 40 guys on the end. That affects things like signing free agents. Right. Right.
Yeah,
or making trades.
You need room for anyone you bring in, basically. And so Chris Paddock is another example. Chris Paddock underwent a second Tommy John, missed the bulk of this past season, is going to be out for at least half of 2023. Right. At the day it's possible, they'll shift him to the 60-day injured list, and that will effectively open up another spot on the 40-man roster. But that can't happen until, I guess, I don't know if it's opening day or mid-spring training. I don't know what that is, but not for a while. So they're playing a little shorthanded with the roster. The other deadline, which is going to spur significantly more action, is the deadline to tender 2023 contracts to arbitration eligible players, and that is, I believe, Friday at 5 p.m. our time. Yeah. And the Twins have one very key decision to make.
Might be the Thursday. Is it 17th? It's the 17th, right? I don't know.
18th.
Okay, it's 18th? Okay, all right, then it's Friday. Yep.
That's the day I'm going to Vegas. So I told Dan, Godspeed, good luck.
You're going to Vegas on Friday, not on Thursday?
Oh, yeah, you're right. No, I'm going on the 17th. Boy, I'm shaking. I've been in a major fender bender. Scratched my beautiful car. Gio Urshela is the big decision here that they have to make, which we've talked quite a bit about. But he was their starting third baseman for last season. He was one of their certainly 10 best players. I think I ranked him like 7th or something on my team MVP ballot. He was one of their few fully healthy. I mean, he had some nicks and bruises and stuff, but he played 140 something games. He was fully available and consistently at least sort of decent. There were only like a handful of players, pitchers or hitters, for whom that was true, and he was one of them. And he's under team control for one more season. 2023 is his final arbitration eligible season. MLB Trade Rumors, which does a really good job with the arbitration projections every year, projects him to make $9.2 million via the arbitration process. That's a point where I would argue, it's essentially a 1-year, $9.2 million deal.
Sure.
He was worth 2 or 3 times that much in 2022. Yep. Because, $9 million, if you're an average player, you're worth about twice that. You don't want to make a habit of signing guys to long-term deals.
I think if he hit the free agent market this year, he'd be disappointed in a 1-year, $9.2 million contract.
This is an interesting thing because this goes into what they're going to do with him.
I agree with you.
Which I would make the case, even though they want to move Jose Miranda to third base more full-time, because Miranda played like 75% first and DH, and about a quarter of the time was at third base because they had Urshela, who's a better defender and a veteran. Well, they've talked about wanting to have Miranda play more third base because that clears up first base and DH for a Rise or Kirilloff or whoever. It clears up for another bat, just a bat-only guy. Larnach at DH, something like that. They have tons of those guys. But even if that's the case, I would still argue, given their injuries and given how the past few seasons have gone from a depth standpoint, getting rid of a guy who played, 145 above average games and is a well-liked veteran guy, has played on winning teams, all that stuff, over $9 million to me would be a mistake. Now, you'd love to have him at $6 or $7 million instead of $9 million or something like that, but that $2 million isn't really going to do anything. And I actually don't think their decision comes down to the $9 million specifically. I think it comes down to, do they want him in a full-time role or not? If they want him in a full-time role, there's no functional difference between $7 million and $9 million for a team with $140 million payroll. But if they're wanting to play Miranda most of the time at third base, and they think they're gonna play a Rise and Kirilloff at first base and DH, and you go, well, we're gonna spend
get a big bat,
or get a big bat, Jose Abreu or something like that, or just cycle injured players through the DH spot, which was initially their plan before everyone was injured last season. Then it's like, well, do we want a $9 million guy who doesn't even really have a full-time spot? Now, I would argue, Urshela is worth that. A 1 year, like you said, on in a free agency.
I think there's no question.
A 1 year, $9 million deal is perfectly reasonable.
Right.
First of all, 1 year deal, it's hard to screw that up.
Right.
Second of all, he's been an above average player for, most of the past 5 years. He's, I think, solid defensively. He's average-ish offensively, 10, 15 homers, bunch of doubles, makes contact.
I took a look at some of the other free agents on the
it's terrible at third base.
It's terrible at third base. I think the top three are Justin Turner, who's not really third baseman anymore, Drury from the Blue Jays, and Longoria. And Gio Urshela had a higher OPS plus than any of them last year.
Yeah, I mean, Drury's going to get more because he's younger. But
I think so, too.
Evan Longoria might retire, I saw, but he's a million years old.
Right.
Justin Turner's a million years
he's
old.
He's not really even third baseman.
But so their decision, it's tricky. Like,
I don't think it's tricky at all.
Well, right, but as we've discussed, and we had Dan Hayes on.
I know. I disagree. But
it doesn't matter if you disagree. Do you know what I mean? It doesn't matter if I disagree.
No. I understand. What you're saying, not everybody here has listened to that Patreon with Dan Hayes.
They ought to, though.
Sort of
it's a great show.
That's true, right.
Yeah, we did. We had Dan Hayes on like 2 or 3 weeks ago on the Patreon. Right. We did like a 2-hour show, and we were talking about Urshela, and I said, Dan, please speak up here and tell John, because John's... Right. Every week I say to John, I don't think they're going to keep Urshela, and John goes, that's crazy. Obviously they are. And I was like, please speak up on this. And
I'm not saying they're going to keep him. I'm saying that they're going to offer him arbitration if they don't get a deal done.
They won't do that
Friday.
if they don't think they can make a trade.
I'm amazed.
They won't. I mean, I'm not saying they won't keep him. I'm saying they won't offer him arbitration
if they don't have a deal done.
If they don't think there's a significant likelihood they can trade him, or they don't want to keep him. But I just think the vibe we've gotten is they're not planning to have him as their starting third baseman next year. So which means by the deadline this week, they either have to tender him that contract, which sort of locks them in, although he's still cuttable and you would pay a quarter of that or something, but they're not going to do that because that's just flushing a couple $1 million down the toilet. You either have to tender him a contract, which keeps him in the plans for 2023 at $9 million projected, which at that point he can still be traded.
Right.
Which is what you're saying. Right. Or you just non-tender him, which happens. I mean, that happens to good players. Trevor Plouffe was non-tendered. You reach a point where if you're sort of an average-ish starting player, you get in your final year of arbitration, you get close to that $8 to $10 million range where teams start going.
Yeah, it's the Eddie Rosario range. It's the Trevor Plouffe range.
Rosario is a better example. It's not that Eddie Rosario, Trevor Plouffe, Gio Urshela are bad players.
Right.
If they were making the minimum, teams would love to have them. Even when they're making $4, $5, $6 million, teams love to have them.
Right.
But that 8, 9,
on
10
the free agent
million,
market, they're going to get a contract for around that range.
Yeah,
There's a pretty good.
I'll be
pretty
curious
good
about that.
chance.
So the decision point is twofold. One is, do they want Urshela as their starting third baseman next year? I don't think they do.
I agree with you on that.
Right. Now, I think they should, but I don't think they will. And then if that's their stance on him, if they're committed to Miranda there, then your two options become non-tender, which is just releasing him for nothing in return, costs you nothing, or trying to trade him. And, like you said, the free agent market at third base is pretty lacking. Urshela is a good, solid player. There should be, in my mind, several contending teams or even kind of mediocre teams that go, hey, it's a 1 year, $9 million deal. We would take that. And then you would, from the Twins standpoint, you would hope they can get, a C prospect or a B- prospect or something, some value, or you swap them for a middle reliever, or you swap them for a backup catcher, or any sort of marginal,
Maybe this takes care of that right-handed middle reliever that we were hoping to get.
There's opportunities there. But I don't know. I mean, I think teams tend to devalue in the moment players who are eligible for arbitration, and we saw that with Eddie Rosario, and we saw that with other players. Because there's a forced timeline with it. I think teams look at Rosario or Plouffe or Urshela or something where it's like, all right, we got to decide in the next 72 hours, do you want him or not? And they go, we'll take our chances when he's a free agent. And I don't think he's going to get significantly less than $9 million as a free agent, although you never know.
I think you get multiple year offer.
Right, except that I don't know. I mean, it's very tough to predict. So from the Twins standpoint, I don't think he's going to be their starting third baseman next year, which makes it unlikely he's on the roster next year. It's certainly possible. I'm not saying that's already been decided. That was just the vibes I've gotten over the past few months. But, then the question is, can they get something for him in trade? I mean, you kind of have to figure out, like, okay, if he's not in your plans, then really even a bucket of balls coming back is a positive outcome versus getting nothing. But I don't know. I don't get the sense that teams are going to be beating down their door for him. I would assume some teams be willing to send them some low-A reliever or something that has some 10% chance to be a major leaguer. But that's really what this next 3 days for them is all about. Now, they have some other players, like Emilio Pagan is in the same situation for...
I mean, Emilio Pagan, I would expect them to get a bucket. Don't expect them to even get a bucket of balls for, but I can see that happening.
Right.
To me, it feels like Urshela is a no-brainer to bring back for arbitration, or to at least offer arbitration to if you don't have a deal on the table. Because I just take a look at the other. Once Arenado decided he was going to stick around with the Cardinals, there's nothing.
I agree.
There's Drury and there's nothing.
I think we're probably bigger Gio Urshela fans, which I did not anticipate saying at the beginning of the year. And it's not because I think he's like some spectacular player. Right. I just think he's a good, solid player, and the economics of his deal, a 1 year, $9 million contract, is the type of deal that should not scare away. I think that's a really good contract for Gio Urshela. Yeah, I just think we might be in the minority there.
Okay.
And I do think they view it as risky because, like you're saying, they could tender him the contract even though they had let's say they had no plans to actually have him on the team, and then you let the offseason play out. You let those 3 or 4 other third basemen sign elsewhere. And then the game of musical chairs kind of stops, and there's 1 or 2 teams that still need a third baseman 3 months from now. And you go, hey, we have Gio Urshela. Right. Remember you didn't want to give us so-and-so 3 months ago? Well, will you do that now? And you could maybe do that. I just question whether they view that whole hassle, that whole ordeal, as worthwhile to get back what is probably not going to be a high-end return for Gio Urshela. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean, I can see that.
And if
to me, it feels like there's very little risk on the back end of that. Somebody,
right? If you think
if you put Gio Urshela on waivers at $9 million, somebody's going to pick up Gio Urshela.
See, but I don't think that's true. I don't think he'll be claimed up. I think it'll be a Eddie Rosario situation, which they put Eddie Rosario. It was the exact circumstances. And we had the same conversation about Eddie Rosario. It was almost like identical conversation, which is like he's a good, solid player, and he was, I think, set to make like, I want to say like $9 million, 8.5, $9 million. It was under 10. Right. And the Twins did not want to bring him back for that amount. Right. Because they thought they had Alex Kirilloff ready to take over in left field. Turns out not really. And the day before the arbitration deadline, like 12 months ago exactly.
Yeah, it's an easy way to test the market.
They put him on outright waivers.
It's revocable waivers. So like you can bring him back at that point.
There's no revocable waivers except for the trade deadline, which doesn't exist anymore.
All right.
There is no such thing anymore.
Okay.
It's just waivers.
Okay. All right.
They put him on waivers, and none of the other 29 teams claimed him because none of the other 29 teams thought a 1 year, $9 million contract for Eddie Rosario was worthwhile. Then he ended up signing like a $7 million contract with Cleveland. Right. Was terrible in Cleveland, got traded to Atlanta, won a World Series, was great in the playoffs with Atlanta. I think it's like an identical situation, which you go, somebody should, even when they put Eddie Rosario on waivers, I was like, somebody should want him. 25 homer, $8 million.
Yeah, but he was a little bit expensive at that time. Even at that, to me, the market for Rosario at the time is different than the market.
You
for
think
Urshela.
Eddie Rosario 2 years ago was a worse player than Gio Urshela today?
I'm saying that taking a look at what was available in the free agent market.
Right. There's always going to be more.
I think there were 30 teams that were willing to pass on Rosario. I can't believe that would be anybody looking for, and I have not dove into which teams need third baseman, right? Right. But if you need a third baseman, boy, is it.
I mean, I would argue the Twins kind of need a third baseman. I guess that's sort of the sticking point here is that I am skeptical of 125 games of Jose Miranda playing third base, and I also wonder if he gets hurt, right? Who's the third baseman then? At that point, they clearly don't want to play Arise at third base. They haven't played him since like the second week of last season when he made a couple errors. So I don't know. They traded away Spencer Steer, who could have been the long-term third baseman. Traded away Encarnacion Strand, who could have been a potential third baseman, although I think he'll be at first base. So, I don't know. This is going to be we often talk on this show about what the Twins can do, what the Twins should do, and what the Twins will do. We go can do, which we're going to talk about with free agent starters. Here are all their options. That's what they can do. Then we talk about what they should do. Here's what John and Aaron think they should do. We're going to talk about that today. We've talked about that with Urshela. I would keep Urshela. And then what they will do, which is obviously the most difficult thing to predict because we have no control over that clearly. And so I think this is a really good example. Like, okay, what they can do is they can keep him. Period.
Right.
They can.
Yeah. You would vote for keep him. Period.
Yes.
I would probably vote for keep him but trade him.
I mean, I'm willing to trade him.
Okay. Right.
I mean, if somebody wants to give you, something you like for him, I'm not like.
But either way, I think we would both suggest you offer him arbitration.
I view him as a very slightly positive value at $9 million. Whereas I think they view him as like a purely neutral value at $9 million. And so dropping him has no, you know what I mean? Like it. So what they can do, they can keep him and trade him, or they can just cut him. What they should do is what we've just been discussing.
Right.
And then what they will do is I think they're just going to non-tender him. I've heard from some people who think they'll be able to find a trade in the next, 90 hours.
I will be surprised if they can't find a trade.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, we'll see. I don't know. I mean, it does affect. That's the other thing. It'll be.
So we could have the Twins making a somewhat significant early.
Yes. I mean, there's going to be a decision made at some point.
Right.
It's tricky. It'll be annoying for us, which is all I care about really. If they keep him, but it seems more like the keep him to trade him scenario, because then that puts the $9 million on the books. It leaves him on any depth chart at third base, and then we spend the next several months being like, well, they could have an extra $9 million to spend if they end up trading or then it leaves it in that sort of weird zone of happening. But yeah, so Emilio Pagan is same circumstance, final year of arbitration, same keep him, non-tender him, all that stuff. He's set to make like between $3.5 and $4 million projected in arbitration. I think we're both probably on the same page there of let's just move on. I think if he were just a free agent and you could kind of look at him with all the identifying characteristics stripped away, like it wasn't Emilio Pagan, it was just a Baseball Savant page with all the numbers and none of the ID. For $3.5-4 million, you go, yeah, it's the kind of pitcher they want. He throws 95, he gets swinging strikes, he gives up a few too many home runs, but he's been good. I think, but it's similar to Alex Colomé a year ago, which is like their option for Alex Colomé was a team option for like $5 million or something, and we were like, look, a 1 year $5 million
deal. It was
deal,
even like 4 or 3.5 or something. It was something that would made sense.
That type of player in free agency is the type of reliever you might want to sign for that price point, and that's true of Pagan here, but. It's not hard to find a mediocre setup man for $5 million, and so I think
have the baggage.
That's my thing, and I'm also just not. I wrote about this. We talked about this all season. Like somewhere along the line, Emilio Pagan convinced the Twins and some other teams that he's really good. And there's almost no evidence of that for like 3 or 4 years in a row now. He's had like a 4.5, 5.5 ERA that time.
Something about his stuff doesn't work. Doesn't play to the level of his stuff.
That's exactly right. And so with that said, I was told at the trade deadline, like, end of July, first week of August, they had some teams wanting to take him from them and were willing to send them, some very marginal return, and they didn't do that. Which suggests to me they think they can trade him now, except I will say that the circumstances do change. At the trade deadline, your options are much more limited.
Especially in the reliever market.
And so I'm very curious about that. Now, what they can do, what they will do, what they should do, all that, I'd cut him. I'd have cut his ass in June. I think I've been on the record of that. I don't see it. And I think the idea of, he's got good stuff. Yeah, if this were 2005, I don't think he has particularly great stuff in the year 2022. He throws 95. Who doesn't? Out of a bullpen, a late inning reliever who throws 95. I think the least likely scenario with Pagan is keep him, period.
I agree with you.
Bring him back for $4 million and just say he's our seventh inning guy or
I
something.
agree with you wholeheartedly.
If they have any,
That would also be my least likely choice.
I mean, I just can't imagine
my God.
the replies on Twitter, assuming Twitter still exists 2 days from now. The replies on Twitter when they say, we've tendered a contract to Emilio Pagan, and they have a picture of Emilio Pagan and they tweet it out from @Twins. The replies to that are just going to be, So I think
You have to be like, even if it's a good, even if it's a good baseball decision, you would think somebody like, probably the supervisor of the social media person would pull a bullet. Can we just have a quick meeting before we finalize
You can't
this?
do this to the poor woman who runs the social media.
Right. Yeah. We have to figure out some way to keep this quiet.
These are nice people that run the Twins social media. I know them.
That's
I
right.
have.
We don't want any press releases around this. We don't want any.
Can we start a GoFundMe to give you a bigger budget?
We're just going to see if somebody notices he's on the 40-man roster on Saturday.
Oh, you're saying just don't even announce it. So, yeah, I mean, I think
exactly right.
the most likely scenario is he just gets cut. The least likely scenario is that he just gets retained, period, which puts the middle ground of can they trade him for, like we said, a bucket of balls, some rookie ball, whatever.
I see Dustin reaching out to the media team, the beat reporters going, okay, I need to embargo this until like April.
And how about like next September? Till my deathbed. You guys can talk about this when I've retired. Yeah, that's good. Yeah.
We just don't want the words Emilio Pagan in any stories now through next October.
I'll be like, can we call him Emilio
we need
P?
a 1 year. We need
No, wait. That gives away too much. Let's call him E. Pagan.
Or they go to Pagan and say, we were willing to resign to pick up that piece.
You have to change your name.
But you got to change your name.
You're now, you know what? You're Joe Smith. That actually doesn't do much better, but yeah, you're Bill Johnson. We've signed Bill Johnson to a 1 year, $4 million. Don't try looking up his numbers. He doesn't exist. So those are the two
Your new name
decisions.
is Edwin Diaz.
Yeah, well, that would work. Those are the two, like, sort of decision points they have to make between now and the end of this week. Right. The other arbitration-eligible players include Tyler Mahle, Luis Arias, Jorge Lopez, Chris Paddock, Caleb Thielbar, Kyle Garlick, Jorge Alcala. Those are, I will be surprised if any of those guys are not tendered a contract.
Yeah, I think what we'll see, my guess is, or at least what we've seen some years is, they go and they
try to work out a deal.
They try and get a deal done. We'll try and find out what those deals are. Any of those guys, do you think they try to offer a 2-year deal to anybody? You think they'd go try and offer a couple-year deal to Caleb Thielbar or something like that?
I mean, they could. It wouldn't really affect too much. But,
I don't think so either.
So, yeah, that's what we have this week. And that will, I think, clarify in terms of trying to figure out what their next steps are, what their available options are. Right. That will clear the picture at least a little bit, although it might not.
Urshela might not. Yeah, I mean, it comes down to Urshela, really.
Right. I don't know.
It's one of the pivot points of this offseason.
I've been waiting to press delete on the cell in my Excel spreadsheet in the bullpen of Pagan for 5 months.
Yeah,
so. Before we get to starting pitchers, which we're going to talk a lot about, the can they, will they, should they aspect of it. That's what we should rename this show. Can they, will they, should they?
There you go.
Let's talk about our first sponsor, which is 7th Avenue Pizza.
You know what is nice to do on a snowy
Crash
day?
your car into a light post?
No, stay at home.
Oh, yeah, I agree.
And eat 7th Avenue pizza.
Yeah, you should really just have cooked pizza for me when I come over.
That's a good idea.
Yeah, they have it at the morning show a lot of the time. It's the official pizza of the Power Trip Morning Show. And
I think that's true.
It might as well be.
Exactly.
The break room at K-Fan, when I show up to do PA show afterwards, like at 10 o'clock.
Smells like pizza.
There's always pizza.
Right.
It's always 7th Avenue.
That's right.
They're a relatively new sponsor of ours, but they're locally made.
We've been eating them for
Yes, I've been eating them for years.
years, months. Right. Yep.
I get them at Lund's and Byerly's. I get that BOGO 2-for-1 on Tuesdays.
Weird, yeah, and now they've got this week, and we should emphasize this. Like, it's only like a couple more days because it started a few days ago.
They got a BOGO for the entire week.
Yeah, at Coburn's and Cashwise.
Yeah.
So they've a BOGO. Go hurry there today.
Get like 20 of them.
buy a couple and then just
Don't hurry too much because some of these people might be driving Honda Fits with performance tires.
Eat them, bring them home, and give them to your family tonight. Everybody gets to stay home and watch the snow. And
if your store,
it's going to be snowing all week, so stock
don't
up.
say that, John.
It's gonna be
I'm leaving
all
Thursday,
week.
so who cares? And if you're local, they support a bunch of charities locally.
Yeah, we go to tailgates all the time. I'm probably going to some tailgates this weekend where they end up they just show up. They show up. They make a bunch of pizzas for everybody. They take no money, and all the money goes to charity.
Right. The most important thing about a frozen pizza brand is that it tastes good.
Right.
The second the nice thing is that it's local and they are actually nice people.
Right. Yeah.
So they fit all of those things that I'm looking for.
Check.
7th Avenue Pizza. Go get them at Lund's or Coburn's, Cashwise. They got the BOGO going on.
Hy-Vee, Holiday Stations, Cooper's Foods, Hornbacher's, Bobby and Steve's, just to name a few.
Okay. Yeah, free agent starters. Let's talk about.
Let's talk starters. Okay.
So, Clayton Kershaw, it was basically a rewind of last offseason.
So, it is going to be a 1-year deal? Do we know that or no?
It's the same as last offseason.
Wow.
Who could have predicted that, John?
Well, I
conversation
know, and I don't get it. I don't get why Kershaw doesn't want a multi-year deal.
Because he almost retires every offseason.
Yeah, well, he can still retire
John,
if he has a multi-year deal.
Let me ask you this, John.
He can still retire. He can also retire.
This is big talk from a guy who has been an at-will, month-to-month employee for the entire time I've known him by his choice.
Right.
So you're wondering why a guy didn't want to sign a long-term deal. Yeah. He gets $20 million every year. I think he's be okay, probably.
I guess.
Last offseason, it was 17. I haven't seen the exact figure, but I saw the LA Times said it's going to roughly be that, 18 million, 20 million, whatever it is. Right. He's not going anywhere. I mean, this is what we talked about with Kershaw, especially to a lesser extent, perhaps Verlander, although I would make the same argument with Verlander, which is from the Twins' point of view. Yes, I ranked Kershaw. I did a top 20 free agent starters list last week, and I had Kershaw 4th.
Right.
And that's great because it's another high-end option. But from the Twins' standpoint, there was never a possibility in my mind, and in their mind, I think, that he was actually available to them because you have to think to yourself, why would a future inner circle Hall of Famer who has spent his entire 15-year career not only with one team, but one of the most successful, biggest payroll teams. What circumstance?
Big city, LA.
Right. What circumstances would cause him to go, I want to go to Minnesota, finish this career up? And I just think it's super unlikely. He talked last offseason a little to the Texas Rangers because he's from Dallas. Okay. But even that, I mean, they offered him, I think, a multi-year deal, it sounds like. And even that, he was like, why am I leaving the Dodgers? It's just, I mean, it's very... Why are you leaving the Dodgers? If you're a longtime Yankee, why are you leaving the Yankees? If you're a longtime Astro, why are you leaving the Astros? Right. Especially for the Twins.
Especially if you've got as much money as you've made at that point.
He doesn't seem real concerned about increasing his net worth from $350 million to $400 million or whatever it would require. So he's off the market, which removes one of the better options, but it was never really an option. Everyone else, there's been no other movement yet. The thing we talked about with the free agent pitching market is the Twins are in a weird spot for them.
Yeah.
Weird in terms of uncommon.
For them is the right word.
Which is that they feel, and I think this is somewhat reasonable, although we'll get into why it's a little misleading maybe or misguided. They feel like for the first time, ever, seemingly, they have plenty of rotation depth. And I think that's not an unreasonable argument. I mean, if everyone is healthy, they have, for a 5-man opening day rotation, Sonny Gray, Kenta Maeda, Tyler Mahle, Joe Ryan, Bailey Ober. That's 5 above average starting pitchers. Right. That's certainly a quality 5-man rotation. And then even beyond that, you have Josh Winder, Louis Varland, Simeon Richardson. They're hoping Jordan Balazovic bounces back a little bit. And then you have, further depth pieces down in the minors. So you got 8, 9, maybe 10 guys that I think you would feel comfortable under normal circumstances having in an opening day rotation. And so that I think will cause them to be like, do we even need to spend or to target a starting pitcher? Because that's been a priority now for 25 years really. But here's I think, the problem with that line of thinking, which is of those 8 guys I named, how many of them can you count on being healthy and effective for 150 innings, let's say, which is not the highest bar, but that's,
It's a pretty high bar these days, actually.
Right. And so I think, let's go through it. Sonny Gray, maybe, although he didn't get there this year because he had some hamstring.
He only had like 110.
Right.
150.
Well, Kenta Maeda, no. Kenta Maeda's missed a year and a half now with Tommy John. We have no idea what you'd like to think that, and if it goes well, absolutely. But who knows what Kenta Maeda is 36 years old. He hasn't pitched in a year and a half. Tyler Mahle, well, you can't count on Tyler Mahle for anything. They couldn't even figure out how to get Tyler Mahle through a second inning by the end of this season. Joe Ryan, you can count on for 150 innings, I would say. Bailey Ober hasn't thrown 150 innings in his career at this point.
True.
Again, if healthy, yeah.
Right.
But
And it wasn't like he had shoulder problems or something like that. It was like some
no,
goofy
but he's
little-
previously had shoulder problems.
yeah.
I'm saying like his professional career. I'm not
Right.
even saying his
Right.
Twins career.
Understood.
His major league career. And then who are the backup 3 guys? So those are your 5 starters. Of that group, I would say you got about 2.5 guys that you can count on to make 25, 30 starts probably. Of your backup 3 guys, Josh Winder was on the IL half the season with shoulder problems through, 60 innings or whatever. Well, you can't count on him to be 150 inning starter. Louis Varland and Simeon Woods Richardson, yes, great. They're healthy. They're promising young players. But with any prospect who hasn't really done much, are you counting on them to be, 150 inning guys? And so, yes, they have 8 or 9 guys that you should theoretically be able to build a good 5-man rotation with some reinforcements on hand for a full season. Absolutely. But the injury aspect means, to me at least, that you really don't have 8 or 9 guys. You really have like 3 or 4 guys you can count on, 2 or 3 guys you're hopeful for, and then some untested guys.
Sure.
And maybe that's still enough to bypass free agency and bypass whatever. But the other thing I will bring up on this is, and I was talking to another beat writer about this with their team, is starting pitching is really the only part of a baseball team where simply having the head count is seen as, well, we're okay. You never hear that with an outfield or an infield or a bullpen. You never hear, well, they got 5 guys for that, so they don't really need anything else. It's so much about filling the innings and being, not left shorthanded, because that's when things really become disastrous.
Right.
That it's like, well, they got 8 guys for that. Yeah, 8 guys for 5 spots, even with some injuries, you should be okay there. Although, as we've seen, you need more than that typically. But that almost ignores then the quality of it. And I'm not saying those guys aren't good. I think all those guys are pretty good.
I mean, in this particular case, we're not talking about we have got 5 number 5 guys here. We're talking about we've got 5 number 3 guys
Here's
here.
how I would view this. Let's say all 8 of those guys are healthy this year, which is never going to happen. Who's your number 1 starter? Sonny Gray, right?
Probably, yeah.
Sonny Gray's
now,
a really
yep.
good pitcher. I like the move to get
Or
Sonny
Molly.
Gray.
I mean,
Right. Are either of those guys, is any pitcher they have in the entire organization going to be favored over whoever they're matched up against in game 1 of a playoff series? No.
No.
How
but
about game 2? Probably not.
maybe?
I don't know. Not in this year's playoffs. I mean, think of
Yeah,
some of these guys
sure.
we saw this year in the playoffs. And so, to me, the problem is twofold. One is to take the stance that they don't need pitch rotation help requires 2 things, both of which I think are a little shaky in my mind. One is you're counting on a lot better health than these guys had this past season. 2 is, even with that better health, you're still got a whole bunch of like number 3 starters, number 4 starters, and 1 or 2 number 2 starters.
Right.
You have really this guy's an all-star, this guy's
Sure.
and so to me it's like you're kind of fooling yourselves in both directions. From a depth standpoint, you're convincing yourself that what you have is going to be enough, when I think that's iffy. And then from a quality standpoint, because the depth is such a concern and the injuries are such a concern, you're saying in your head, well, if they're healthy, we got enough. But if you're healthy, do you have enough quality at that
Right.
point?
Yep.
And I don't think that's a bad rotation. I mean, I think the 5 that I named would be probably the best opening day Twins rotation since Johan Santana.
Sure.
But the reason that it's the best since then is because Johan Santana was a number one ace starter. And so I realize sitting here and saying they need to bring in a great starting pitcher is not some brilliant take. Right. That's a take you can have for every team every year. But to me, the notion that they can sort of turn away from starting pitching and devote all their resources elsewhere relies so much on health being good and then kind of ignores the fact that, well, they're still kind of just a collection of pretty good pitchers at that point.
I mean, I would suggest, I agree with you on the front end of that, or on the high end of that. I agree with you less so on the bottom end of that, right? Which is, I agree with you that this team, if you're going to go get starting pitching, of the list we're going to go over, I'm not very interested in most of this list. Right. Right. I like the way Nick Nelson put it in his offseason handbook thing. He's basically, he called it the Sonny Gray threshold. If you can take a look at this pitcher and say, well, he's better than Sonny Gray, then I'm interested.
Sort of what I'm saying. Right. Which is like,
then I'm interested. And if you can't say that, or even, I would suggest even if he's about the same as Sonny Gray, I'm not as interested. My interest level drops off a cliff to some extent at that point.
I think I would say if they're equal to Sonny Gray, you should be very interested, because anytime you're sitting here saying Sonny Gray is their best pitcher, why would you not want to do that? But I get what you're saying. Like, their need for a Dylan Bundy or J Happ, or going back even further, I would say Ponson or
I would even say
Ortiz.
Jose Quintana. Like, even somebody who's at a level, right? You know what I'm saying about? Like,
right. Because the guys we've named, to get a spot in the rotation, you have to be better than, Bailey Ober or somebody like that. Right. But that's not really true. Which, if that's the threshold, there aren't going to be very many.
From your point on the depth point, that doesn't make as much sense as but that's why I feel like we differ, right? You can say, and I can too. Listen. They've got $50 million to spend. I'm not advocating that they don't spend the $50 million because it's not worth it to sign Jose Quintana for $10 million, right? I'm not suggesting that,
agree,
right? If you got it, that's fine. But to me, the top pitcher is an absolute priority in the same way that a premier shortstop is an absolute priority.
I agree.
Do you know what I mean?
We're in a complete agreement.
As to whether or not the second tier pitcher is a priority, it's much less of a priority.
I agree. I mean, there's no need for them to sign, the guys they usually sign, which is some random 34-year-old fourth starter.
That to me is a third or fourth level tier pitcher.
There's truly no need, because not only wouldn't those guys crack a healthy 5-man rotation, your reinforcements, I would rather just give those starts to Simeon Woods Richardson or Varlin or whoever. Right. So we're in complete agreement there. I think the question, like the debate is, you said Jose Quintana.
Eovaldi is going to be where we're going to start to wonder about, right? Like,
you might also just be giving their in-house guys a little more credit.
I do.
Than I am.
I absolutely do.
Even setting aside the injury thing, because you have to sign someone.
Don't want Eovaldi on my team. I'm just like,
Yeah, to me, it's just, when's the last time they had too much pitching?
Well, that's all. Again, if they've got $15 million still sitting around,
but they do, right? What else are they spending it on?
Well, you could be spending it on Carlos Correa,
right? You still have $20 million to spend.
Maybe we'll see how much you have to spend on Carlos Correa,
right? They're not doing that, so it has to be. So, in terms of what makes sense, I think we both agree. We can go over what we both agree on, which is, if you can find someone, I would say as good or better, you'll say better than Sonny Gray. Or if you don't think Sonny Gray is their best starter, if you think it's Tyler Mahle, I would say, how would you possibly know that? He hasn't been healthy at all. Or Kenta Maeda, who's been even more injured. But if you think one of those two guys, or even if you're a huge Bailey Ober, Joe Ryan fan, the threshold is this guy better than that? Now, I would argue, is this guy as good as that? Because that's the thing, right? Like, you go, well, they already have Sonny Gray, so they only need this guy. But, well, I'd like a second Sonny Gray to start game 2 of them.
Let's start going through the names.
So the guys who are very clearly above that threshold are Jacob deGrom, which they're not signing Jacob deGrom. Verlander. So they're not signing Justin Verlander, probably. Kershaw, which we just talked about, he's off the market. The one, to me, that stands out the most and really fits precisely what I'm looking at here is Carlos Rodon,
Right.
which last year,
But I think he's going to be the one that a lot of teams are going to say that about because most teams don't think they've got a shot at DeGrom or at Verlander, right?
But
Those
as
guys are
we
gonna go
saw
for
last
$40 million.
offseason, he was coming off a similarly dominant year where he missed time in September with shoulder problems, and he has a history of shoulder problems, and he couldn't even get a 3-year offer.
Right.
I mean, we talked about this.
Right.
The Twins shied away because of it. So he ended up signing a 2-year deal with an opt-out with the Giants. He made 31 starts. He threw 180-something innings. He was, again, dominant. 250 strikeouts, just great numbers across the board. And now he's hitting the open market. Now the question with him is,
So it's also interesting, just as we're heading into arbitration week, that the White Sox did not offer him arbitration.
Yeah, you
Or no,
placed a
no,
lot
I'm sorry, not the qualifying offer. I
you
guess,
placed a lot of
right.
emphasis on that, which at the last year at the time you were saying if they don't even think he's healthy.
No, I'm just thinking how much different the White Sox year is this year if they've got Rodon in that rotation at this point. If they end up offering that,
the problem
qualifying
with
offer.
that though is that it's very possible that the White Sox are just dumb.
Well,
You know what I
that's
mean?
right. Yeah, that's right.
And
No,
I'm not
that's right.
saying it's not possible the Twins are dumb, but I'm saying like
Oh, I was absolutely worried about the fact that they didn't offer him because they knew his arm is better
listen,
than anybody.
If your own
You're right.
team
Right.
doesn't even think enough to you that they're
Right.
worried you might accept a 1-year deal,
Right.
but it's just possible the White Sox
Yeah,
are just dumb.
right. But I just
made a mistake.
Right.
I mean,
As we are approaching, I guess that wasn't arbitration. I was thinking it was arbitration, but it wasn't. It was a
they
qualifying
didn't make
offer.
him a
right.
qualifying offer.
Right.
Do you know who did make him a qualifying offer? The Giants.
Yes,
They're not
exactly
dumb.
right. Yeah. Right.
So to me, yeah, I mean, you're right that he's the youngest of the high end guys. He's oddly enough the healthiest of the high end
He's
guys.
also the only one that's really anticipated as being available. Like,
Wow.
almost everybody thinks
Right.
DeGrom's going to re-sign with the Mets or
I don't think he'll
or the
resign with the
Astros.
Mets. But he's going to get $50 million a year or something.
Right.
So, but the reason I think the Twins should be trying to target Rodon is A, he's one of the probably 10 best starting pitchers in the world.
Right.
B, I think the injury label, the injury prone label with him, we saw it last offseason, kept him from getting any significant
Right.
offers. I think it's likely, even after a very healthy, very good season, that that's still going to linger enough in the minds of interested teams that it's going to keep him. He's 30.
Right.
A pitcher like him with a clean bill of health might get a 6 or 7 year deal at $30 million. I mean, it might get $200 million.
Right.
I think this is going to keep him closer to $100 million. I could be wrong. And that to me is a price point that the Twins can say, look, it's a tremendous risk, but is he any more risky than any starting pitcher that you're going to sign? I mean, I listed the 20, like I said,
Right.
and I went through and thought about it, and I said, he's got this injury prone label hanging over him for the rest of his career. But over the last 2 years, he's made like 58 starts. You start to go through these other guys on this top 20. DeGrom's been hurt for most of the last 3 years.
No, I'm with you.
Verlander missed 2 years with Tommy John. Kershaw's been hurt for the last 10 years, basically. Like you start to go check by check, and you go, well, is he actually any more injured recently? And he made 31 starts for the Giants. He's been healthier more recently than most of these guys.
Well, that's true.
It's just that his early career, it's like we talk about. If you hit 300 in April and you struggle for the rest of the season, you'll be perceived as having a pretty good season. When you're injured early in your career constantly, you get that label and it's very difficult to ever shed it. So
I'm sure his talking point is going to be, I've learned how to manage this shoulder.
Yeah.
You know, that between the year I had 2 years ago with the White Sox, and I didn't keep as good of take as good a care of as I needed to, and therefore I was unavailable for late August and September. But last year we stayed with the whole routine for the whole thing, and so we've got this thing under control. That's going to be his sort of
now, for a team that just
that's going
fired
to be his narrative.
For a team that just fired its trainer,
Right.
the notion of let's bring in this guy who needs to be managed with care and we're going to do it right is maybe a little optimistic from the Twins standpoint.
Yep.
But to me, he is the best and really the only like home run fit. And I would just argue with him, almost every pitcher that you're going to sign in free agency is by definition a veteran pitcher. They've gotten to 30. He's one of the younger guys actually at 30 because he debuted at 23 or whatever. They're all going to have tremendous injury risk over a 4, 5, 6 year deal. There isn't a pitcher that you can sign to a 5-year deal here who's not at risk for significant injury. And so maybe he's at slightly more risk for a significant injury, but I don't even know if that's true. What I do know is he's a hell of a lot more upside than anybody else you can get on this list. And so if they feel at all about the rotation, as I feel, he's clearly better than anybody they have. He has the potential to be your number one starter and a true number one, Cy Young caliber, game one of a playoff series starting pitcher. I mean, I would argue he's an ace, but whatever, if that's a meaningless label.
Right.
But if you could get him for what Robbie Ray and Kevin Gausman got last year as the top two guys, which was 5 years, 110 or 115.
Yeah.
I would do it. And I'm not saying that's without risk. I'm not saying that's like amazing value over the life of the contract, but I'm saying what other way can they get one of the dozen best pitchers in baseball other than to commit more years and more money than they're comfortable with because of the injury factor? And you're flipping a coin. Is he going to get hurt? Then it's a bad deal. If he's going to stay healthy, it's a great deal. But you're flipping that same coin with almost any pitcher. I mean, look, they traded for Tyler Mahle, and the big talking point, well, he's a horse.
Right,
The guy didn't make it 10 innings before he broke down. I mean, Sonny Gray, look at it. Kenta Maeda, look at it. And so to me, that should be their number one target other than, re-signing Correa or something like
Sure.
that. After that, it's debatable, as you said.
Yeah, this is where I get a little.
It's debatable in part because just where you rank these guys and all that, but just that's the cutoff. I think the cutoff is, Verlander, Rodon, whoever you have.
We should just talk a little bit about DeGrom and Verlander. In fact, that I would presume that we think they're going to end up getting like a Scherzer type deal.
Yeah,
Scherzer last year got a 3-year, $130 million deal. So essentially $43 million, $43 million
which
a
is
year
the
for
most
3
ever
years, right?
annual salary.
Yeah,
for a
most
pitcher.
of our annual salary. With Verlander on the high end of his age, he's 39. He's about to turn 40. Is that right?
Correct.
Right. DeGrom, I think there's a little bit more debate there as to what you do with him because, like you said, he's been unbelievable. He's still young, but he has also missed
35.
That's right. You're right. You're
He
right.
didn't debut until he was 27.
No, you're right. Yeah,
26.
That's right. He had a late start to his career. But he's also pitched
hurt
26 games over the last 2 years total.
He missed 13 months.
Right.
Then came back in August.
Right.
And struck everybody out. So, yeah, I mean, I think we talked a little bit about Verlander like a week or two ago, but like Verlander got a 2-year, $50 million deal from the Astros last offseason when he hadn't thrown a pitch in 20 months.
Right.
And he was 38.
With an opt-out.
Right, with an opt-out, which he used the opt-out.
Right, yeah, that's right.
So if that was what he was worth as a huge question mark coming off Tommy John surgery at age 38, what is he worth, I would say, with this later this week? I believe he's going to be named the Cy Young winner. I had a vote.
So too, right.
Spoiler alert, I voted for him. I don't think we're supposed to say that, but whatever. What is he worth then? After 180 Cy Young caliber innings? Well, you'd think he's worth 2 years, $80 million, or 3 years, $100 million, or something like that. With DeGrom, it's like he's been the best on a per start basis. He's been the best pitcher in the world for 5 years. He has 2 Cy Youngs. He has I think a third place Cy Young, and then like you said, he's been injured for the past 2 years. But within that, his last 2 years, this year and the year before, were the 2 highest strikeout rates in the history of baseball among starting pitchers who made at least like a dozen starts or whatever. And so, yeah, if you're the Mets or if you're the Yankees or the Dodgers or the fill-in-the-blank team that's got a $200-something million payroll, do you say to yourself, as long as we can avoid 5 years with him, is it worth 3 years, $150 million or something?
I wonder the same thing. Like to me, it was like looking at him just straight up. I'm like, I'm betting he wants 4 years,
right?
And I'm betting somebody will give him 4 years, right? And $38 million a year, $40 million a year. I mean, we're playing at that level, right? So somewhere between 4-year, $150 million deal, 4-year, $160 million deal, $170 million deal.
Now, if he can't get that, and it's February, maybe it's a Correa situation where the Twins go, we'll give you a 1-year, $40 million deal or something like that. But other than that, I don't see really any scenario where he goes to the Twins, which leaves you with Rodon or this next phase before
all of those teams that you mentioned before would be willing to give him the same 1-year, $40 million deal that the Twins would be willing
before
to give him,
we get to the next tier and debate those guys a little bit. Let's talk about native deodorant.
Listen, I'm a big fan of native deodorant. I like smelling good. Chrissy especially also likes me smelling good. They also just seem to do. There's something about these these new companies, especially the internet-based companies, where they just do stuff well. And their latest thing, which is their cardboard packaging, I can't frankly believe we don't all have cardboard packaging.
Plastic-free packaging.
Yeah, that's right. I can't believe deodorant doesn't come in cardboard. Like everybody doesn't do it because it just. I actually like using it better than I like using the plastic thing with the gears and stuff that break and blah blah blah. It's just a little push-up roll.
It's also aluminum-free. Uses natural products with an ingredient list that they just lays it all out there for you. You don't have to worry. What am I actually putting on? Stuff like shea butter, baking soda, coconut oil, that sort of thing.
Right.
A lot of good. John uses what he used, the vanilla coconut.
I like the marshmallow and vanilla. Their toasted marshmallow and vanilla is their latest one that I like.
A lot of good scents, a lot of variety, and you can smell and feel fresh all day with Native. Get 20% off your first order by going to Native DEO like deodorant.
Yeah.
NativeDEO.com/Gleeman. Use the promo code Gleeman at checkout. That's NativeDEO.com/Gleeman and use the promo code Gleeman at checkout. Okay. So once you get past DeGrom, Rodon, Verlander, you mentioned Nathan Eovaldi. I would mention Chris Bassett.
Yeah.
Also, I'm sure I'm botching this name, but there's a great Japanese pitcher who's an outright free agent named Kodai Senga. And the reason I say he's an outright free agent is most great Japanese players over the last couple decades, including like Ichiro, players like Yu Darvish, Shohei Ohtani, players like that, and there's been a lot of great players. They're only available, or they were only available via the posting system, which is they're not outright free agents.
The posting system, or in Shohei Ohtani's case, it was
he was young enough.
Amateur draft,
the international process.
International,
so they were capped what you could sign him with, and he wasn't an outright free agent. But Senga, who's a upper 90s right-handed pitcher with a he calls it a forkball, but it's basically a splitter.
29 years old.
29 years old. He's been he's won a Cy Young, the equivalent of a Cy Young over there. He's been a great pitcher over there for a decade, basically. He signed a 5-year deal with the Hawks, SoftBank Hawks, but that it had an opt-out specifically so that he could pursue Major League Baseball because he's wanted to do that. And so he's a rare, in their prime, under 30 Japanese superstar who's just an outright free agent that you don't have to pay his former team. You don't have to get into some weird bidding process. He's just a free agent, same as Carlos Rodon, same as whoever. And actually more available because there's no qualifying offer. There's no draft pick compensation attached.
You don't have to negotiate with his team or anything like that, right?
Yeah, now they changed it so that's a percentage of the contract goes to the original team.
That's right.
So to me, I would put those three, Eovaldi, Bassett, and Senga. Now, obviously with Senga, I've watched him pitch. He actually pitched against USA in the Olympics that I watched, and I've watched a bunch of videos, but I'm going off what people are saying about him. Those three seem to me as sort of, at least in my view, as the right on the border of kind of what we're debating.
Yeah, that's right. And I love that when we go from generalities and rhetoric to specifics because I probably wouldn't put Bassett at that level, but the other two I'm a little more open to.
Now, I would say for people who are wondering about this, go to Baseball Reference and look at Sonny Gray's last 2 or 3 years.
Yep.
And then look at Eovaldi and Bassett, and there's even some other guys. They're like eerily similar. They're very similar.
Yeah, that's right.
And
Bassett's got he was the most durable of certainly more durable than Eovaldi.
Right.
So
those guys, I guess, kind of represent the debate that we're having here, which is that your viewpoint is it's not that it's not worth getting those guys.
I guess I'm not would want to pay the freight on them.
Right. It's not worth paying a premium when who are they going to bump from a healthy rotation? Are they better than Gray, Maui, Maeda, whoever?
Give me a contract that you think Bassett gets on the free agent market. 351?
Yeah, or 4 or something. Yeah, I mean
468.
Something.
How old
like
is he?
33 or 34. I mean it's hard to tell. I would say between $50 and $20 million a year for 3 or 4 years, something like that.
I guess I would put it this way. This goes back to something we talked about before. There are players that I don't worry too much about the contract, but the fact that I'm asking about the contract means that
I'm surprised
he he doesn't qualify as one of those players where I don't worry about the contract. Do you know what I mean?
I guess. Yeah, I mean,
with a Rodon, I'm willing to say, screw it. We'll pay the extra.
I guess I'm just at the point with the Twins where, I mean, the contract always matters. Like, I mean,
I know.
I want Chris Bassett, but if it's $100 million, I don't want Chris Bassett.
Right.
I don't want Martin Perez, but if it's $5 million, I'll take Martin Perez. Right. But I guess I'm just at the point, particularly from a pitching standpoint with the Twins right now. They just need high-end talent. And I think it's dangerous, or it's an opportunity cost or a missed to just assume full health, assume development by guys like Joe Ryan and Bailey Ober, when you have the opportunity to just bring in somebody who can reasonably be described as your best pitcher. And I just think that's the rotation is the only spot where people think of the number, the quantity more so than the quality.
Yeah.
In this regard, like think if we were talking about the lineup and we were saying, they got a guy for every position, all 9 positions. So they probably don't need a hitter. But then we were like, well, yeah, but could they go out and sign, I don't know, Brandon Nimmo or Jose Abreu or something? No one would ever go, well, yeah, they're better than the guys they have currently at that spot, but they have the lineup filled. Right. But for some reason with the rotation, it becomes about filling it first and foremost. And I think part of that is just because not filling it becomes such a disaster from a pitching standpoint because it's the one thing you can't really paper over. Yeah. I mean, if you don't have depth at first base, you can just shift someone over to first base. If you don't have depth in the rotation, you get what we saw the past few years, which is things just completely fall apart. But to me, if you can get a guy, whether it's an outfielder, a first baseman, a shortstop, a catcher, a reliever, a starting pitcher, if you can bring in a guy who can reasonably be described as your best player at that spot, or your best player in a lineup, your best player in a rotation, I think you should be pushing to do that. Now, if the price point becomes, you have to factor in that, it's not an emergency. It's not a, all-in situation to get a Chris Bassett or Eovaldi or even Rodon, because, they do have plenty of options to fill out a rotation. But what they don't have, in my mind at least, is plenty of options to start a playoff game where you might reasonably have a equal or better chance based on your starting pitcher. And that's been true for 30 years with the Twins. And I just think you're fooling yourself from a health standpoint and a quality standpoint to look past legitimate, like number 2 caliber starters, when the flip side is you're playing up the value of a Sonny Gray or a Tyler Mahle when they're the same pitcher.
Right.
So,
but I mean, that's part of the fact that they're kind of the same pitcher. Like Bassett, in my mind, listen, Bassett's had a great career. He's certainly built to this point where he's, recognized as what he is. He's also 33. It took him till he was 33 to really have, this sort of year. Does he really change the calculus on a playoff? When I look at games 1, 2, 3, do I feel significantly better going into games 1, 2, 3 with Bassett, Hill, and Gray?
Yeah, sorry.
Rich Hill's available. For some reason, I have been wanting to say Sonny Hill all podcast. I don't know why.
How about Benny Hill? Right, I get what you're saying.
Like, does that change the calculus much? And I'm not saying.
But I just don't have faith that Tyler Mahle, Kent Maeda, that those 5 guys are going to be available to you on October 1st. Yeah, I don't have that much faith that they're going to be available to you on April 1st.
I know it's.
So I would say after those guys, so that's a total of, DeGrom. I mean, let's not count DeGrom and Verlander. Let's go Rodon, Senga, Eovaldi, Bassett. That's 4 guys.
Okay.
I would be pushing very hard to sign one of those 4 guys. If you can't do that, or the price becomes unbearable, which is very possible, the next group, then I agree with what you're saying.
Yeah, right. Now it kind of becomes where we're each drawing our individual line.
Because the next group, here's like the next 5 I have, let's say. Right. Tyler Anderson.
Right.
Jameson Taillon. Yeah. Taijuan Walker. Jose Quintana. Andrew Heaney. Noah Syndergaard. Martin Perez, Sean Manaea, those guys.
Right.
I'm
not disappointed with any of these guys on the team. Don't get me wrong.
Right.
But
It's just, in a normal Twins offseason, last offseason, the year before, you'd kill for these guys because they'd be your number 2 starter or whatever.
Right.
But they're fortunate that they're in a position that with good health, those guys would be your 4th, 5th, 6th starter.
Yep.
And so, I agree. Don't spend $12 million a year on a 3-year deal to get one of those guys. Although I would still be open-minded to bring them in on a 1-year deal.
Of course.
But that to me is the cutoff. I guess Bassett probably is the cutoff, or Eovaldi, whoever you view as the lesser of those two. Someone like Tyler Anderson, Tyon, I like those guys actually. In a normal circumstances, I'd be trying to sign them to a 3-year deal for $35 million or something like that. Even Walker, I like quite a bit. And then
I like Tyon probably best of those.
I think I had him. What did I rank him? 9th?
Heaney maybe.
Best, I think. And then you get into
here we go.
Your Phillies connection, Zach Eflin.
Yep.
You have Ross Stripling. You have Mike Clevenger, although he could be more of a rehab guy, which I wouldn't be surprised because he comes from Cleveland, where Falvey acquired him.
Right.
I guess.
Yep.
Michael Wacha, Johnny Cueto, who they could have signed last year and didn't. Those, I agree that. Look, if those guys are available for $3 million, absolutely bring them in and figure it out later. Right. But I wouldn't be pushing for anybody beyond the top 8 or whatever.
Here's when I take a look at this list, I think this is the one year that this is a disappointing free agent list for the Twins. Every other year, we'd have been taking a look at this free agent list and going, look at all of the freaking options there are. There's a lot of really good options there.
I agree.
And instead this year we're like, well, there's 3 guys we really want, and all of them are injury prone, or either super old or injury prone, right? Which or have that label on them, and we can debate whether that Rodon earns it now or not. But the point is, that's not who we were looking for, right? And plus,
no,
couple
most
of
years to get Jameson Tyon, 3 years, $30 million or whatever it ends up being, you'd be like, that's great. Now he's their number 2 starter or whatever.
Right.
Yeah. On one hand, you should feel better about the rotation, the fact that they don't need that, except even that. Because look, if the guys who were injured this year are still injured in 2023, you will need guys like that.
Right.
That's, I think it's fun. I think we're not.
After the 2019, 2020, 2021 season, we'd have been like,
yeah.
Game on, baby. Look at this list.
Right. We'd be saying they should sign 2.
Right. So we'd have been
2 guys from the 8 to 15 range.
Right. Exactly.
Basically.
We'd have been similar to last year.
Right.
Last year when we were taking a look at that top 20 list, we were like, okay, we need one of these 4. We need one of these 2 of these guys, blah, 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 blah. And then, of course,
I went back and looked at my list because I've done this list 4 years in a row for The Athletic. Last year, they signed Dylan Bundy, who was number 20 on my list.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
Because I tweeted out the other day.
And I would much rather have Johnny Cueto than Dylan Bundy.
Well, yeah.
As 20th on the list.
Sure. They could add Johnny Cueto on a minor league deal.
I know they could have. We talked about
Chris
it.
Archer instead.
Yeah.
So that's where they're at with free agent starters. Now, can, will, should. We talked a lot about what they should do, what we each think they should do. We went over the list, which is what they can do.
Right.
Now, what they will do, I don't think they're going to go spend big money on a free agent starter. First of all, they've never done it, so that's a safe assumption. I don't get the sense from talking to them publicly, privately, whatever, that they feel the way I do about the health and the rotation quality.
No.
I think Falvey, at least publicly, has talked enough to make you think he views it as we got 8 guys for 5 spots, not we got 8 guys, half of them are hurt, on and on. Whether that's a mistake or not, we're going to find out. But I think that's sort of how they view it, which, last week we talked about shortstops. And if they're not going to sign, that's the thing that's tricky to figure out.
This is where we're wondering what the hell has to go on.
Right, because something has to.
Especially if they turn down the arbitration on Gio Urshela as well. So they got $60 million stuff.
Right. If
throw around.
Between now and the end of the week, Urshela and Pagan get non-tendered, they're just to get to this past season's payroll, which was roughly $140 million without some injury expenses in there. They have, like you said, almost basically $60 million. They're at $80 million if they were to cut those 2 guys. They're at $80 million, and that includes $8.5 of which is Kepler, who I think is very much up in the air in terms of a trade candidate.
Agreed with you.
So they could get to like $70 million, essentially, in which case you need to double your payroll to get to this past season's payroll. Yeah. What the F are you spending $70 million on if it's not re-signing Carlos Correa and it's not going after Rodon?
I just love that every offseason we end up doing this, right? Every offseason we're like, how the hell are they going to spend that money?
You're saying Aaron Judge on a 1-year deal 3 days before opening day? Is that
there you go.
Yeah, so that's, I think, I don't know, where they're at. I would make the argument that if you were to cut Urshela and Pagan and you were to trade Max Kepler, you have essentially $70 million to spend,
right?
65 even, let's say, whatever, to spend to get you to this point payroll-wise. Now, the payroll should go up every year, but, whatever. How can you get to $65 million? Well, here's how you could get to $65 million.
Yeah.
You sign Carlos Correa for 35 a year for however many years, and you sign Carlos Rodon for 25 a year for 4 or 5 years.
You get $5 million left to throw in a reliever.
I mean, you got $5 or $10 million left to go sign a backup catcher and a reliever, and let's go. Yeah. I don't think they will do that.
Yeah, but that's.
I think there's an argument to be made that you should do that.
Yeah,
I've gotten such to the point with the Twins and just teams in general. Maybe it's watching the Astros and the Phillies specifically, but.
Yeah. And the Padres.
We've gotten so, and I mean, it started out rightfully and logically, which is baseball for 100 years was not enough attention was paid to service time and contracts and payroll space and age and aging patterns and how it was just give me the best player, blah, blah, blah. But I think we strayed so far from that and got so. Because the information is now available, we can break down the same sort of stuff that a front office breaks down. I think we strayed, I don't mean we like me and you, but just overall, strayed from the idea of what if you just tried to bring in a really good player all the time?
Right.
And I think that's almost at the point I've gotten. And the reason I think this year in particular that should be the bright flashing light at the top of whatever list.
Yeah, I mean,
that's what other circumstances are you going to be sitting there and saying we have pretty good depth at almost every spot and we have $60 million to spend? What other offseason are you going to have fallback options that are reasonable all across the roster and have $60 million to spend? And if you're not going to take that opportunity to then go bring in the best possible highest talented player, which is Correa, Rodon, fill in the blank, Bogarts, whoever it is, well, then you're never going to do that.
This has been my talking point for a month and a half. For a month and a half, once I took a look at sort of the payroll, I've been saying, this is what you build to.
Right.
This is why you manage things for 5 years. This is why you are careful about the contracts.
This is why you try to keep your books so clean.
This is why you work to create a blank canvas. And now you've got the blank canvas. Now that's an intimidating thing to do, to take on. A blank canvas is an intimidating. You can scribble on it. You got to be ready to play when you've got a blank canvas. You got to have a plan. You got to be able to put it in. You have to invest something in it, and you have to be able to show it to everybody when you're all done and say, "Well, how'd I do?"
This is
and this is it.
Becky and I go through this every night when we are hungry for dinner, and we open up DoorDash. And I just think there are 50 places I would like to eat from. And you just have paralysis by analysis or whatever it's called.
Right.
They have a lot of options, and I would take it a step further and say, I agree with what you said there. And I would almost argue that if you're not going to go for big ticket items or superstar players, star caliber, impact, guy who could win a World Series MVP type of player. Right now. Then that means two things. One, you're probably never going to do that on long-term contract,
exactly
which I think is
potentially
very
true,
possible with this front office.
Yep.
But what I think it also means is all the things that led up to this, all the lack of spending on free agent starting pitching, all the trading away guys when they got sort of expensive,
all the being careful about the contracts,
all the keeping multi-year contracts off the books, all that stuff, dumping Donaldson's contract, everything that's happened over the last 6 or 7 years. It almost, if you don't then, pedal to the metal now, push all in now, whatever metaphor you want to use, it almost invalidates the previous 5, 6, 7 years. And then you're just, if you don't do that now, if they just, sign a guy for 10 here, sign a guy for 10 here, then you go, well, what was the point of kind of limiting yourself previously to some mediocre teams because you didn't, you were signing J Happ instead of, whoever. What was the point of doing that if there's no, light at the end of the tunnel? There's no pot of gold at the end of the rainbow, and you're just going to do business as usual. Then you should have been more aggressive previously.
Especially because as you take a look at the pitchers they have on this rotation right now,
right?
They're all free agents next year.
Right. Maeda's a free agent. Mally's a free agent. Gray's a free agent.
Right. Yeah. So you have got this 1 year window that you have built.
Right.
You traded for Sonny Gray last offseason. You traded for Tyler Mahle at the deadline. You did it all. So this year you would have a good, strong rotation to go do something.
Right.
Now go fucking do something.
Look at John's cursing. Does the Basilica know you curse, John? Will they let you back in if I
think
tell
they
them
will.
you curse?
Yes. Oh, for sure.
Oh, they do.
Yeah.
You curse a lot in the Basilica?
Oh, for sure.
You don't get struck down?
Nope.
Cursing Basilica?
No, I'm good.
Oh, boy. We got a lot of pastors and priests who listen to this, John.
I know.
Will you guys contact me if you need to strike him down? What is the word? Smote? God smote him?
Smite me?
Yeah, whatever.
Aaron is willing to smite me.
I'm willing. I don't know if I'm able. Here's all I do. Put him out on the street and let me drive around in the snow. I'll do it on accident.
You can just make me drive you home.
That is
your
what
car.
we should do. You drive me home and you'll walk back. Okay, so we didn't really talk about Cody Stage.
Better yet, you walk back. I drive your car home and I get smoked.
It's still snowing, John. I might just have to stay
It's
here.
going to snow all week.
Can I stay here, John? Can I just stay here and you
yourself
drive
some
me?
7th Avenue pizzas?
Can you just drive me to the airport Thursday morning so I can go to Vegas from here? Okay, so that's where we're at. If you want to hear us talk similarly about the shortstop market, go listen to last week's episode.
That's right.
Next week's episode,
probably the reliever market.
I don't know that they're going to be in the reliever market. I think next week's episode, we're going to know about Pagan. We're going to know about Urshela. We're going to see the guys who are added to the 40-man
We're also going to talk about the AL Central.
Yeah,
and
we'll
what people can expect from the rest of the AL Central next week.
Yeah, we have a better picture through the reporting from people who cover those teams of the White Sox payroll situation, Cleveland's payroll situation, Detroit. I don't think Kansas City is really a factor, but so we'll go over that, relative to where the Twins are at. I think it's kind of it's interesting that the Twins could be the big spenders of the division potentially, although it goes back to the discussion we just finished here. Right. I think here's a prediction. I think this offseason is going to be significantly faster moving in terms of big contracts and prominent players either signing or being traded than usual.
Not like last year with the lockout. But, right. Yeah. Right.
But I think because of the lockout and because of the previous 2 COVID years where spending was down and revenue was down and all, I think this is the first clean off season there's been in 4 years or 3 years. And I think they just signed some new television deals and internet deals where everybody's got a bunch of money. They made $11 billion last year, split among the 30 teams, not evenly, but split among the 30 teams. And so I think, we've seen Edwin Diaz and Kershaw and some other players re-sign. I think we're going to start to see some trades even maybe today or tomorrow before the Rule 5 deadline.
I think so too. I think one of them might be Gio Urshela.
Yeah, and we're going to start to see some players like that. So, what are we going to talk about next week? I think there's a decent chance.
We got plenty to talk about.
There's going to be actual.
There will not be a Patreon this week, but we are working on getting a Patreon set up with Do-Hyung Park, who now we not only can talk about the Jeopardy game with, we can also talk about the Power Trip initials game with him. Listening to him, did you hear it?
I watched it. Yeah.
I talked to him a little bit afterwards, or texted him a little bit afterwards, and he basically said this one was far more intense and intimidating
than
Jeopardy. And he's not kidding. He's not being facetious. He's like, there's just because you've got Marty Gelder, who's just an absolute power tool in that situation.
A power tool? Yeah. She's nuts, is what you're saying.
She's very competitive about it.
Yeah, they told her
like they're huffing ammonia.
They must have told her to stay seated because she was like, I'm trying to maintain. Well, yeah, and in terms of intimidating, big name, pressure filled hosts, certainly Corey Cove beats Ken Jennings.
Sure, of course.
Any day of the week.
Course.
Just on career accomplishments alone. Yeah. Okay.
I was
So
very happy he won me $50 though from some meat sauce.
yeah, I wish I could have bet on it because I was so confident. I mean, we were both confident that Doe will win. No offense to Marnie and meat sauce,
Sure.
but Doe's on. I don't even think Doe performed well, and he still won. I mean,
Yeah,
first of all,
actually,
they were
I agree with
difficult
you.
questions. I only got 2 right playing at home.
I got 3 or 4 right. I think I would have tied him.
Yeah, he. I talked to him after. He was like, "Those were a lot harder than I thought," and he felt like he was one clue away from getting a bunch of them. That sort of
right.
But I showed him how to play because I got the at-home version we played during some rain delays at Target Field this past season. And the first time we played, he was terrible. And then the second time we played, he got 10 right. And that's what I think will happen. Like if they let, which I'm sure he'll come back. If they let him come back, I would bet even more money that he will win. I will take him in any bracket if they do a tournament.
Right.
Any bracket that doesn't have AJ in it, I will take him
That'll be interesting.
even up against the field to win that bracket.
Well, they're talking about maybe just doing a mano he versus AJ.
They're just going to skip him right to the front of the line.
No, they just want to do that as an exhibition, a friendly.
Oh, wow.
Something like that. Yeah.
Yeah, it's like Chelsea versus Real Madrid or something like that.
Something like that, yeah.
I wanted them to do, because now I've played and he's played, and we both won our debuts.
Yes.
I think we should have an all-twins beat writer
I know.
where it's me, Doe, Dan, Betsy, and Megan Ryan
I
from
like
the
it.
Star Tribune. Phil, I'm not certain is aware of not only the initials game, but radio as
It's not
a
totally
thing.
clear he knows what KFAN is.
Oh, I'm saying radio as in like a medium. I'm not
right.
sure. Although he's old enough that he probably. Hi, Phil. We gotta get Phil on still too.
We do.
So yeah, that's it. Talk starting pitchers this week. If you want to hear us talk shortstops, go back and listen to last week's
If
show.
you want to hear us debate Gio Urshela even more in depth, check out the Dan Hayes Patreon episode from a couple weeks ago, something like that.
We teamed up against John.
That's it.
And otherwise, thank you to Native Deodorant. Thank you to 7th Avenue Pizza. If I can make it home without crashing my stupid car, I might have a pizza right
For
now.
lunch? Sure.
Yeah.
All right.
Why not? I got 2 of them in my freezer right now. All right, goodbye.
Gleeman